Welcome to Storytelling with Lindsay Bednar.
Hello.
Hi, Kristen.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, it's perfect. I love the background.
What's that?
I love the background in your room. It's very Cape Cod.
Oh, thank you. I thank you for saying that because I feel like it's missing something in the background, shelving, whatever. It feels a little unfinished, but yeah, I do like the I don't know what you call that kind of detail. It came in the house when we moved in, so I can take no credit, but how are you? I'm so excited to connect with you. When I first came across your profile and what you were doing, I was like, oh, this is interesting. But then to find out, to connect with you a little bit further, to find out that you were a forensic, retired director of forensic toxicology. Did I get that right?
Yes, so I worked in the field of forensic toxicology for about 26 years. I still consult in that field. And the last laboratory that I was affiliated with was California Department of Justice, and I retired as the director. It's a statewide crime lab for Cal DOJ, and we serviced 46 out of the 58 counties. And I retired in 2022.
Okay, and so you retired, and then 5 years ago you recovered from, is it six chronic illnesses?
Yes, so I was diagnosed in 1999 with fibromyalgia. I started showing the symptoms in the early 90s after the birth of my first daughter. Shortly after 1991 is when she was born in 1991. So I started showing having back pains, and I was a waitress while I was going to school, and then I kind of did everything backwards. I had children first, then got married, then graduated from college. So while I was while I was attending Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, I was also working as a waitress. So I was carrying heavy trays, and I thought, oh, okay, well, that's why my back's hurting. It's probably weakened muscles from having a child, and that's probably what's contributing. And maybe so, but the symptoms progressed over the next couple of years where I was in chronic pain. It probably started in about 94, pretty much every single day until things started subsiding between 2018 and 2019. So, so
For
roughly
those of us,
25
for those of us who are less familiar with those symptoms of fibromyalgia, so start with back pain. What else did that consist of?
So my pain was predominantly in my hips. There were many days where I would walk down anywhere, and it felt like the best way I could describe it is it felt like one of my legs was out of socket. It
Oh,
was, and when I put weight as I would walk, it would just send shooting pain up the lower part or the upper part of my leg into my hip area and up the back. And a couple of other areas where I would notice the pain would be in the sternum area. It would feel like a really tightness and heaviness in the shoulders, in the neck. I would get headaches. But the main area for me, and it varies from person to person, was in the hip area.
okay. Okay, so this was, you said around 94 where you were having these symptoms.
So I started having the symptoms in 92.
92.
Yeah, 92. They kept increasing each year, but 94, it was when I noticed I was in pain almost every single day.
Mm.
And, I tried working out at the gym, going for walks, stretching. I was offered prescription pharmaceutical drugs. And back then I wasn't into toxicology, but I just didn't like to take medication as much as possible. But I did start taking a lot of ibuprofen, which is over the counter. It's an anti-inflammatory.
Mm.
And I started taking that around that time frame on and off. And then after the birth of after the birth of my second child in 1996, the pain increased even more. And I noticed that I was on average taking about 1,000 milligrams of ibuprofen multiple times a day. I was maxing it out basically, but I was watching liver enzymes and my kidney function because those are the areas that get impacted the most. It was in fact impacting me in other areas, but those are the areas I was mostly concerned about at that time. And I just kept going back and forth to the doctor. They were doing tests on me and saying, you have a lot of inflammation in your body. You probably have lupus. A couple of doctors said, you're probably going to be bedridden by the time you're in your 50s. We think there's other stuff that we can't determine. And it was in 1999 that there was a traveling doctor or doctor that was filling in for my normal doctor that happened to be at the practice, and at the time I was living in the state of Washington. And he said, oh, I think you have fibromyalgia. My wife has that. And I said, what is that? And he said, it's just there's certain triggers, pain areas that we're going to test. And if you have those pain points in your body, that's likely what's going on. And so he looked through my chart, and through the examination, he determined that that's what was going on. And so he said, there's no cure, quote unquote. There are maybe some treatments. He pointed out a book or a doctor at UCLA that was studying guaifenesin, which is an expectorant when you have coughs. It will bring up mucus. And he was looking at guaifenesin as a way to extract out some of the accumulation of toxins, such as lactic acid in the tissues. So that was the one theory, that there's accumulation of lactic acid in some of the tissues, the muscle tissues, as a result of having a typically normal, low basal temperature, which I had. And if you have a lower basal temperature, the theory was that you would have accumulation of different acids and toxins in the body that would actually cause the inflammation. And that could be partly true, but that wasn't the root issue at all. And so there were all these theories going around. There was maybe an injury in the past, maybe stress, just all kinds of things flying around, right? And I just wanted to know what's causing it so I can remove it and go on.
Right. And this is 7 years after you started having your initial symptoms, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sure you were very thirsty for answers by this point.
Absolutely, and especially because my scientific background, I initially started as a biochemistry major and biochemistry major and forensic science major, a dual major. And then I met my ex-husband and we moved to Portland, Oregon area. That's how we ended up in the state of Washington. We lived right across the river. And I switched schools, so they didn't have a forensic science program at Portland State, and their biochemistry program was very different than where I came from. So I switched into micromolecular biology. And so with all of that scientific background, I'm always very curious, so I started doing my own research. And it seemed like stress was something that was related to that. Certain foods, like acidic foods, tomatoes, sometimes pasta, bread. And so, carbohydrate diets or diets, high in carbohydrates might be causing issues. So I kept changing my diet around going into the early 2000s, and nothing was really fixing it. I did see that when I was exercising more often, that actually it did reduce some of the inflammation, some of the pain. It is really hard to do that when you're in so much pain, hard to push yourself to get there, because the first thing you want to do is just not move, right?
Right?
At least for me.
It's hard to push yourself regardless. So when you're in pain, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And the pain, it was constant pain every single day. I would get up. First thing in the morning I would feel was pain. Last thing I would feel when I would go to sleep was pain. And many times I was woken up at, in the middle of the night, and I would take what would help to kind of reduce some of the pain, would take a hot bubble bath for, 20 to 30 minutes. Because in the water, I didn't feel the pain. I don't know if it was a buoyancy, but it would just, there's something healing about the water. So I would spend a little bit of time in there, that would help at least allow me to get back to sleep. Because the other thing is, if you have sleep deprivation, it can actually increase some of the other signs and symptoms and increase inflammation and pain. I think everyone is probably from, if they're not getting enough sleep, you don't feel well, you can't process information effectively. And we know that our mind and our body are connected. Um, and your consciousness level can be impacted by that too.
That's what I was going to ask is how was your mental health during this time? Because I can be such a baby when I even am down and out for a few days because when you don't feel 100% physically, it can really impact how you're feeling just mentally, emotionally. Um, so having that after so many years, how was your mental health at this point?
Well, oddly enough, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Certainly pain can affect your mental health, absolutely, and it did. But it was also the lack of sleep as well. And so I did, finally, my doctor said, let's try an antidepressant. And this was in 2000. And I said, I don't want to take that. Just try it. It was Wellbutrin or bupropion. So Wellbutrin is the trade name, bupropion is the generic name. It it literally felt like I was putting a poison in my body. Like immediately, it didn't feel right. And I couldn't, at that time, I was not meditating. I didn't have any spiritual connection to myself like I do now. So it just felt like heaviness. It felt like not positive qualities, let's put it that way.
Mm.
And the same formulation they'll give to people when they're trying to prevent smoking and certain behavioral aspects, right? It's being used for a lot of different areas for people being depressed. But I felt like I couldn't, like it didn't get rid of the pain, but I didn't feel like I could connect to myself, detaching mind from body, right? So I only took that for a week, and the doctor said, you really need to take it for a couple of weeks to know if it's going to work. I said, you know what? I don't like this. I'm not taking this. That was literally the one and only time that I've tried an antidepressant. And I'm glad I had that response because I know what, as a forensic toxicologist, I know what they do short-term and long-term to people with their mind and physiology. So, and for me, I'm speaking on my experiences, certainly not telling other people not to take it. So they wanted to push pain medication. Obviously, pain medication can help you temporarily, and mostly they were pushing benzodiazepines, opioids, and this is on the beginning of where we started to see the opioid epidemic, right? And at that time, in 1997 is when I started in the area of toxicology, and I really was doing a deep dive in understanding what pharmaceutical drugs and how they can affect people and their mind and physiology, digestive system, and all of that. And especially clinical, that's what I was in, workplace drug testing and clinical at that time. And so I just said, no way, no thank you, but still dealing with the pain. But going back to your question with the mental health, oddly enough, trauma, PTSD, stress are really the root issue when it comes to fibromyalgia. And a lot of the doctors would say it's all in your mind. And I would say, that's rude. Like, what? Well, they weren't far off. It really was. Now, not that I magically made this up. The pain was really there, but it was related to repressed trauma, PTSD, and stress. Trauma and PTSD from my childhood. And maybe having a child triggered some of that, brought some of those things to the forefront that I had never dealt with, universe, God, my own physiology was saying, pay attention to me. You can fix this. We all have the ability to look within and figure out the root issue within ourselves. But the external factor, scientists don't always have that information.
Okay, yeah, that's so much I want to delve into there.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're speaking to cellular trauma, right? Which we are we're starting to have a lot more science backing this up, if I'm accurate. I know that people have been speaking uh, to cellular trauma for a while now, but it seems that it is being more accepted in the scientific community because there are, I guess, there is research that points to it. If I'm not mistaken, you can speak to that. But I want to know how you got to this place where you've been dealing with pain for years. You're given a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, which seems to ring true. So how did you go from that diagnosis and essentially refusing the pain medications and not getting on SSRI, which I can't imagine how difficult that was to do. So kudos to you. But and I also want to say for anybody who is on that or has used that or it's really not it's no shame in that. It is you were gifted with the knowledge of what it does to your body, which the average person just is completely unaware of, myself included until recent years. And so no shame whatsoever. I'm so glad that this information's coming to the forefront. So how did you get from getting that diagnosis and then figuring out that this is rooted in trauma?
Great question. So fast forward, like going through that journey, relationships I noticed were not beneficial necessarily. Just my daily routine, diet, lifestyle, meaning I worked many, many hours because that's just when I'm passionate about something, when I love something, I just want to throw myself all in. Really, really loved this field of toxicology, so passionate about it. I'm a very curious person and I just want to know more, right? And so I worked 12, 15-hour days, lots of overtime, and I had young children. My ex-husband and I had opposite schedules. We didn't have the best relationship. It was not necessarily a healthy relationship, but it was a lesson. It was a necessary lesson. And we moved from Washington into California, where I grew up. And I didn't want to leave. I loved Washington. I felt like I was on vacation every day that I was working. We were blessed to live really close to the river, and I love water. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent a little bit. Moved to California. I was hired by Sacramento County Crime Lab. I worked there for many years as a forensic toxicologist, testified in court and all of that, and ended up divorcing my ex-husband, got another relationship, which was another lesson. And there was a theme here, a theme for me to learn from of not having self-empowerment and allowing myself to give up my personal power. And it was in 2017 when I had a very difficult conversation with this person that I was dating for a long time that I felt like we needed to go on separate paths. And so it was then where I started doing some meditation and research on why am I attracting the same thing over and over in my life. And I also started at that time with the California Department of Justice as the director of the statewide forensic toxicology lab, and which was extremely stressful, many, many hours again. And so I did research on diet, research on exercise, research on daily routine, all of these things, and found an amazing trainer. Oh my gosh, worked really well with me with the fibromyalgia and the pain. And I
You're
worked out,
talking yeah, personal trainer for strength training and
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And just put me on an all protein diet, mostly protein diet, which is good because it helped reduce inflammation, but I wasn't taking in enough carbs where it kind of aced my gallbladder. So I had to have the gallbladder removed. It was, but I kept a food diary, and I noticed with my daily routine, more sleep, changing my lifestyle, reducing stress, that there was this was all intertwined, right? And started going to a therapist, starting to reach out to spiritual gurus, and realizing that there was still that core of daily stress with the workplace. That was all related to that and the routine. And so things started subsiding. And I said, okay, I'm getting somewhere. So fast forward into 2018, hugely reduced the pain. There was certain flare-ups, but I wasn't completely gone. And then in 2019, I realized it was completely gone by making these changes. And how I know it was gone forever was I experienced some trauma during that time frame for about 2.5 years, from 2019 to 2022, where I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, but the fibromyalgia did not come back. And the other thing I wanted to note was, not only did I, over the course of the 5 years that led up to 2019, I was also diagnosed with diabetes. I was diagnosed with irritable bowel disease. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I was diagnosed with having I had all of these allergies, rashes and everything. And so what it really interesting is, after interviewing many people with fibromyalgia, it's pretty common to have all of these other issues that are actually paving the road to autoimmune and other things, and especially with the chronicity of this. And so for me, there were 6 different chronic illnesses that I was able to get rid of by the time we went into 2019.
Wow. Okay. So is fibromyalgia, do they give it is there any root cause that the scientific research has come up with?
Well, first of all, are you referring to Western medicine?
Yes. So if you were to see your primary doctor, and they were to diagnose you with fibromyalgia, and this is, brand new to the patient, and you say, well, how did this happen? What is this? What caused this? What type of answers do they have?
I can only speak to what I was told, and also what I'm hearing from other people and what's out there on social media and some of the literature, right? Is stress, certainly stress, PTSD, and trauma seem to be related. They're not sure how. They can say what was told to me and what I've seen is an injury, food, stress, lack of sleep, but then again, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Sometimes the actual fibromyalgia causes those things to also occur, right? But there doesn't seem to be, specifically related to Western medicine, the approach to root cause. And here's my analogy. I used to work in the forensic toxicology field in a laboratory, right? And I was the quality manager. And when we would have something that wasn't working out, we would do a deep dive with root cause analysis. And anyone who's a quality assurance manager would know that you just keep going and going. You don't end. You just keep going to find what is causing this, now what is causing this, now what is causing this. We don't see that with Western medicine. We stop at the first level. Oh, okay, stress, that's it, or this. And so I have more knowledge than Western medicine. I'm now an Ayurvedic practitioner. And with Ayurveda, we look at mind and body, right? We do a deep dive with what's causing something, and then we go beyond that surface level and beyond that surface level, right? And we don't look at a disease. We look at an imbalance,
Mhm.
and we look at the whole body. And so mental aspects seem to be the predominant root cause with most illness because, and it's related to consciousness because our physiology mirrors our consciousness level. We don't talk about the spiritual aspect of health in Western medicine. It's all literally black and white, analytical, and it's surface level. And so because of that, this is why we do not see an end result related to a cure. So our bodies are very complex. There's not a one size fits all approach, number one. The causative factors could be many, and it's all a theory at this point, right? These are ideas, but the answer seems to be 90+% pharmaceutical drugs.
Mhm.
And I understand that. Pharmaceutical drugs are fabulous for short-term response. Let's help this person feel better temporarily, absolutely, so they don't lose their mind or so they can get some more sleep. But it should be used temporarily while we're doing the root cause to
Mhm.
figure out what's causing the issue so we can start removing the causative factors and maybe step them down and off of the pharmaceutical drugs. So, because we know that some of these pharmaceutical drugs can actually cause inflammation, they can block absorptive qualities in the digestive system, they can cause disease too, like SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors have been linked to type 2 diabetes. And just so you know, I will be happy to share any references to anything I'm talking about. I want people to be able to do their own research. I'm not the know-all be-all. Always question. And I am happy to be challenged because I don't know everything. And it helps me become a better person. I'm speaking to my own experience and my knowledge of toxicology, pharmaceutical drugs, and some of the other information that's being shared. So trauma, PTSD, the mind, what happens with that is if there's an imbalance in the mind, it can cause what we call mistake of the intellect in Ayurveda. And when that happens, we're not balanced to make the right choices, daily routine, lifestyle choices, food, when we eat those foods, but also can be related to the education of that. Relying on a one size fits all or a very quick remedy versus looking to see what's causing it. Relationships, external factors, environmental factors are huge too. All of these things can play on our mind and our physiology and our overall well-being.
I think one of the biggest disconnects we have in the medical community is we're not seeing ourselves as spiritual bodies first in a physical body. And there's this big disconnect when there everything is interrelated, just as the physical body is interrelated, just as you have, pressure points in your hands and your feet that can alleviate pain elsewhere. Same thing goes for our spiritual body. And so, we have you are working with these various modalities that are recognizing the interconnectedness. And I really think that's going to start to move throughout all of the medical community at some point, because people are just becoming so aware.
They
We're not
are.
disjointed, as a lot of practice uh, sees us.
Absolutely. And that's coming out in so many different ways. Some of the things that, I wasn't a spiritual person at all. I was very black and white, very analytical, follow all the rules, color inside the lines. Someone tells me how to jump, I want to exceed that, people pleaser. And it was somewhere between 2018 and 2019 where I started questioning a lot of things and saying, this seems like a definition of insanity. Why are we continuing to do the same thing over and over again, and it's not working. We're getting the same results, or actually, the healthcare system's degrading. People's health and mental well-being are exponentially degrading. Something's got to change. And we're seeing many, many people of all walks of life coming up with ideas. And, some resistance to that. And that's okay. It's not for everybody. But I'll tell you, when I went through what we call a spiritual awakening, okay? I call it a spiritual butt kicking. To kind of open my mind to other things outside of the linear black and white world, right? And started to looking into alternative therapies. I started with acupuncture and acupressure and massage because those are more accepted, and wasn't totally open to some of these, like the Reiki and the energy work. I thought, how is that possible? Is that voodoo magic? What is that? But I'll tell you what, as I started making those major changes in my own life, and not everybody's created equal, right? Some of these folks in the spiritual realm are not all what they sell themselves to be. But I did find some really amazing people. I had a pretty good therapist who was open to spirituality, but I still felt like I was stuck in a loop that I couldn't get out of in the mind. And I wanted to break free and be liberated from the mind, so to speak. So when I started reaching out to some folks in the spiritual community who weren't necessarily licensed therapists, it opened up the door. Meditation, you're getting out of your mind and you can feel that state of blissfulness. That in itself does heal the body to the cellular level as you're speaking, because your mind and body are connected. Just like conversely with negative thoughts, negative energy around people, or even negative thoughts about other people are not healthy, that you're taking that energy in yourself, and that can cause illness. And especially if that energy is stuck in the physical body, we start to see an imbalance in the mind and an imbalance in the physiology. And that's maybe where I was with, negative thoughts about myself, negative thoughts about, or fear. Fear is the the biggest debilitating thing you can have, no matter what your beliefs are.
No question.
And I lived in the state of fear because of the trauma. Very debilitating.
You spoke to energy several times, and how Reiki is more of a woo-woo modality for many than like acupuncture or massage. And you're right. I think to a lot of people, it's like, well, how do you heal somebody by basically putting your hands, not even touching their body and just kind of moving around the energy field. But I always, not just like anecdotal stories of how Reiki has helped people, but I always refer people back to the science too, because our energy can be measured, and we all do have energy field, and that's scientifically proven. So when you understand that everything is energy, that energy can't be destroyed, it can be just dispersed, then you start to understand, okay, so this isn't just a woo-woo thing. This is science-based as well, and especially from someone like yourself who was and is so science-based. I feel like that approach can speak to a lot of people more so than perhaps just some of the stories, because it is very science-based.
It is. It's physics. It's
Yeah.
basic physics. Just like you're saying, we are made of energy. Earth, water, space, fire. Earth, water, space, fire. What am I forgetting? Earth, water, space, fire, air. And those 5 different elements, a lot of people forget about the space, right? We have space in between our joints. And the earth would be like our muscle tissue. Water could be in our blood. So there's energy around us. And because of that, we create that energy. But there's vibrational frequency. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. with numbers, with letters, with words, spoken, with thoughts, with food, with plants, with sound, right? This is why people use sound therapy.
Right.
Those different frequencies are healing. And when you look at a lot of those, which is odd, I'm going off on a tangent again. When you look at those frequencies, I don't know, there's one like five, whatever, if you 369, or if you add all of those numbers together, those three numbers, they will always reduce to 3, 6, or 9.
Mhm. Mhm.
When you listen to the binaural beats or whatever, that's what they seem to always reduce to. So those frequencies are significant within us and very healing to different tissues, especially the mind, very calming. And also, it's not just the sound, but it could be like food, how it tastes, water when you drink it. If the air is drying, it can affect, your energy around you. So I think going back to Reiki, what you're doing is you're just through your energy, and you probably could feel vibrational frequency or heat in your hands. Different people are sensitive to different levels, right? So not everybody can feel the same thing. But if you were to put your hand over someone else, you're going to feel something. It's going to be either be heat, you're going to feel like a little flickering of energy. It's when we're doing Reiki, and I'm not a Reiki master, so I don't completely understand how to do it, but I understand that basic concept of moving energy. You're moving energy throughout the body, so that's stuck, that creates inflammation, illness, discomfort, disturbance out of the physical body. But it's not just that that works. There's other ways like exercise, yoga, meditation, because you're getting to a transcendental state. And when you calm the mind, you calm the physiology, you just feel good. It's like I don't know how to explain it to people who are not open to this necessarily. I'm not sure who your main audience are.
We've had a lot of episodes on meditation. I've had my meditation coach on before. I've talked about meditation
Okay.
times.
Yeah.
Yes, and so all of these modalities, yeah, they're not
It's
new.
consciousness. And as you increase your consciousness level, you actually within yourself become more connected versus disconnected. So fear disconnects us from ourself, and it prevents us from feeling bliss, it prevents us from feeling happiness, and it is not beneficial. So really the only thing to fear is fear itself, right? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Everything else is all an illusion that we create in our mind. And it's a perception. One analogy I also use is, let's pretend there's a statue of a person, they're like crossing their arms or facing one direction. And Lindsay, you are facing the front of the statue. I'm facing the back of the statue. And we have two other people facing the sides of the statue. All of our perceptions are correct. They're absolutely correct for what we see. But, and we may communicate that this is the right way to go based on our perception, but it doesn't mean it's right for the other person because their perception is different. It's until we all connect all of our perceptions together and being accepting and opening and trying to reduce judgment, that's what creates wholeness. And that creates a higher vibrational frequency. And we're seeing more of it today with people who are disagreeing at the table, whether it's politics or the medical community or food or whatever, is being open to hearing that other opinion and willing to work with them, not sacrifice their own values, but being willing to work with them. When we see folks that are black and white, one size fits all, doing things to create fear, that's the time to use discernment, because that is disrupting wholeness. That is disrupting health. That is disrupting wealth. That is disrupting all aspects of all of us here and our well-being.
Yeah, it's such an important thing to talk about right now, is how fear is such a driving factor for so many, and we've never been so polarized in my lifetime. And actually, astrologically, the last time we were this polarized, it was like 200 and I want to say like 49 years ago. It was 247 years ago. Pluto was in Aquarius. We have this very polarizing time as well. It also was when Charles Dickens wrote Tale of Two Cities, which I have to just remind you the first line. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Because both two things are existing right now, and depending upon what your frame of mind is, which is based on your lens, your perspective, your experiences, you are going to see reality in a certain way. And so I very much believe and have a deep knowing that despite anything that's going on in the world, we get to create our own reality, and we get to use our mindset to respond to what is, because it's like if we're trying to resist what is, that's another definition of insanity.
100%. We have shadow and light all within us. And what we see outside of us is only a reflection of us as a collective. Well, it's one thing I learned when I was studying Ayurveda at Maharishi International University. Is one of my professors said, our leaders are a reflection of us as a collective and our consciousness, and vice versa. And what's the way out of this? Or not way out of this, because that's avoidance. What's our way through it? It's observing, acknowledging, reducing attachment, forgiveness, which means forgiving ourselves and forgiving others, because we can't forgive others if we can't forgive ourselves, and vice versa. That's going into duality, right? In order for light to exist, we have darkness. Our shadow side, which we're seeing a lot of that, right? In all different areas, walks of our health, right? Our choices with food, our politics, our government. But what the shadow represents is our ability to heal, our ability to work through it. It's actually a blessing. And to your point, with more polarity than we've seen before, perhaps it was always there. We didn't see it. There's our ability to see things with vision, right? But there's there's visible light and a frequency that we can't see, that's not tangible. We're starting to see things that weren't tangible to us in the past, and perhaps they were always there. We just either chose not to see it, we didn't have the education to look there. I don't know, it could be a myriad of things. But now it's here. You can't go back. It creates an opportunity. There's always a silver lining to educate ourselves, use discernment, and make decisions based on that, what's best for yourself, right? Which may not be best for the other person, but it creates an opportunity also that as we each individually heal, other people will feel that. And our health is directly, our mental health, our physical health, has a direct impact on our crime rate, on our economy, and beyond. And as things degrade in the areas of health, it will actually affect all of those areas. This is why health is the core. with consciousness in our mind and all of that. And interesting, when you go back, a lot of folks aren't open to astrology, but there's science behind it. With Ayurveda, we look at Vedic astrology, which is different than Western. They both are, my understanding is they're both accurate. The Western astrology is more of the outside or active aspects around us, and Vedic is more on the internal. And you're right that we're going through another cycle. We've been here before, but now we have a different opportunity to make change, and nothing's written in stone yet. Nothing's written in stone yet. There are a lot of predictions I hear from a lot of astrologers. What they're going to find is some of those predictions, maybe as a whole, might be accurate, but the details, I would be very careful about that, because many people are not as attached to the outcome as they used to be. It's more about the process. And the process provides that learning opportunity. So, and more people are opening up to astrology and some of these, what people would call woo-woo. For example, when I started going down this path of spirituality and I become more verbal about it, within my professional world, specifically forensic toxicology, I've lost a lot of friends. A lot of colleagues have kind of turned their back on being as open to communicating with me, a lot of rolling eyes. And you know what? I don't mind. I don't mind. That's not my problem. It's really not. But I think that I feel that way because I used to be that person. I used to be that person that wasn't open to it and wasn't wanting to have that conversation. I would hide from it when I first started to look at it and be open to spirituality, and I'm kind of shy, with sharing that with certain people because of worried about being judged. But that goes back to the fibromyalgia. I was always worried about being judged. I was always worried about what other people thought. I was always wanting to serve others, follow all the rules. I'm not that same person anymore.
Yeah, that's a very people-pleasing tendency, which I had the majority of my life too. And it is incredibly debilitating. I mean, luckily I wasn't having physical symptoms, but I did have an intuitive reading where basically she said, if you don't get off what's on your chest and if you don't start speaking your truth and using your voice, if you keep stifling that, it is going to start showing up physically.
Yeah, real thing. I can attest to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't using my voice. Outspoken about linear things, not, in fact, my own kids said, I'm more of an emotionally connected person with them and other people than I've ever been in my life. I always tried to do the right thing. I was nurturing in some ways, but more of a tangible way. Let me pay for your college. Let me get all of the nice clothes for you. Let me make sure I provide a healthy place for you to live. Let me make sure I try to prevent you from getting in trouble. Almost like a helicopter mom, right? Kids, all they wanted was time in my heart. They didn't care about any of that other stuff. That was for my own good. That wasn't necessarily for theirs. And that was a hard lesson to learn in 2019. I had 3 major events that occurred to shake me out of that detached Taurus moon, very logical and tangible, versus allowing myself to be an emotionally connected person and available to people because of fear.
Did you say there were 3 major events?
Yes.
Interesting, because one of the things my sister says frequently, and this happened to her as well, to thwart her awakening, is first we are hit with a feather, and then we're hit with a brick, and then we're hit with a truck. And if you don't pay attention to the feather, and if you don't pay attention to the brick, the truck is coming.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's That's profound. That's what happened to me, and it was all within a couple of months of each other. Where, wow,
Yeah.
yeah. And threes, there's got to be something about the three. Three is a significant number for me personally. I went to a restaurant twice in the last week, and my bill was 33.33, meaning $33.33. And then it's just, and then if you add all of those numbers together, it equals 12. 1 plus 2 is 3. So they actually all equal 3 as the frequency, right?
Very,
That's how my mind works. I see codes, I see numbers all the time.
that's a very divine number. I mean, Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Yeah, it is. Um, wow, that's really, uh, I'm gonna look more into that. The feather, the, what was
Brick,
the second?
the brick.
Brick and the truck.
Yes. And
Wow.
ironically, the two of you, my sister, and you two have been introduced to each other just recently through one of her clients. So I know you guys are going to be connecting soon, and I'm
Oh,
very excited for that because you'll have so much to talk about
can
as
you
well.
remind me who your sister is?
Yes, Kristen Rowell.
Oh my gosh, that's your sister?
Yeah,
I didn't know this. I
yeah.
saw that she was a guest on your podcast, and that's what connected me to you.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
didn't know that she was your sister.
Yep, she's my big.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So she very much like you has had the awakening going from a very, she was a lawyer, so very pragmatic, logical, linear, to just her opening her heart, her world, her, yeah, in the way that she serves. So very cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that when I'm going in the spiritual world, I absolutely am still in the analytical. I use it all the time. Um, it just depends on the topic. It depends on the purpose, the time of day, even where I'm going to go back and forth. Like I have my own podcast, and so I'm more in the analytical. I want to know more. I want to know
Yes,
more.
your health is your wealth, which I love the name of that.
Thank you.
Uh, could not be more appropriate for just, yeah, it's the foundation of everything.
Hmm. Yeah, and going through having the blessing of, and even though I was in 2019 was not an easy year, 2020 wasn't easy, 2021, 2022 started getting easier for me in 2023, personally, right, and professionally. Sometimes those things happen in our lives to wake us up and to wake us up to connect back to self and release that energy that isn't serving us and to forgive people because no one's perfect, right? And the other thing too with consciousness is many of the things that happen in our lives don't necessarily happen to us, they happen for us. Even though when you're in it, it's hard to see things that way. And so there are times where I'm reminded of things that occurred during that time frame, but it's not helpful to ruminate on it. It's just not. And but there are times where it gets triggered and it comes up, and instead of freaking out over it and ruminating, I try to take a step back and observe. Which I didn't know how to do that many years ago. But going back to the blessing is I've met so many people over these years that are just amazing souls,
Mhm.
that are within the healing arts, that are doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, psychotherapists, spiritual gurus, Ayurvedic practice. I mean, the list goes on. And through meeting some of these people in 2021, I thought, maybe I could create a space where I could bring these folks together to make it easier for people that are going through what I went through to find them instead of, because I did a lot of research and searched for people. It was a lot of heavy lifting to help myself improve my health. And so I eventually and launched a startup that does just that. So we'll see what the universe has to hold, and God, I have just complete faith that whatever's supposed to happen happens with those types of things in our lives.
Absolutely. And it is such a beautiful thing when you start to step into this community focused really on connection to self and all around health, the connections that you make. And yeah, it's a wonderful group of people. And it's very far reaching and it's growing every single day. I mean, I feel like I'm relatively new to it, being that I started meditating, I think around 2017. But my knowledge and use of different modalities continue to grow all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I started meditating around the same time you did, but I used guided meditation, mostly music, sound, because that spoke to me. And I was introduced to transcendental meditation in 2020, and I avoided it for some reason. I wasn't ready. And then 2021 in the fall, I finally learned it, and it changed my life. Absolutely amazing. I still use sound therapy. I don't do guided, but I use sound therapy a lot of the times. But the transcendental meditation is what really helped me kind of lock down a lot of the inconsistencies, make them more stable, and also raise the consciousness for me. I know it's not for everybody, but there's scientific studies, this is what I liked about it, that actually showed reduction in heart disease, reduction of depression, chronic illness, in some cases, also addiction, and increases the level of intellect so you can access your intellect immediately.
Oh,
Yeah. However, in the area I live, we have, I don't know if you're familiar with Crystal Tones, it's a sound bowl company. Well, we have it saturated in our town, and we have this area where there's sound therapists or folks where they do sound therapy every single day from 5:30 to 6:30, pay a nominal fee. I've had profound experiences with that where I was able to go into a transcendental state and beyond. And I have brought people in recent times, brought a friend who's really tangible and wasn't, just started becoming open, but doesn't meditate, is very logical, you know, show me the money, so to speak, right? Show me the evidence, and introduce this to him, and profound effects, and
oh,
had an experience that is very similar to almost every single person that's been introduced to this particular modality, but specifically related to this group of people, which will be on my podcast in the near future. I'm going to
very
share with
cool.
everybody.
I'm excited to tune into that. Hey, how would you describe when you are in those places, what it gives you? Because it for me, it's been tough to put it into words, but I have achieved a state in meditation before that the only thing I can compare it to is the euphoria I felt after my babies were born, where I had like that burst release of oxytocin. But in these cases, it was just feeling a sense of wholeness and joy and uh, a connection that is difficult to find for me in any other way than when I'm fully just concentrating on connecting to source in my head. So
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to explain to people who've never experienced it. In fact, I was one of them, and I got bits and pieces of it, like small experiences where I felt really at peace. And then as I started doing TM and you integrated sound therapy, now I feel that most of the time there's a lot of tests in my life where it throws me out of there, or there might be a planetary alignment where it throws me off there too. Food I've eaten and all kinds of stuff like that. But the best way I can express my experience is it feels like I'm floating in heaven, where there's absolutely no pain, no thought, no worry, almost like you're, and for someone who's had pain medication, right? Where you feel no pain, right? And you feel euphoric, but that always has a side effect to it when you take a medication, where you feel drowsy and it affects your digestive system, or it affects your sleep, or it'll affect, you know, coming off of the drug, the withdrawal. You do not have that with meditation where you feel that blissfulness. It's bliss like you're literally connected to God. There's no better place you can be. There's no medication on the planet that could even come close to this. And it's in the explanation that I've received, when you feel this blissfulness, it is literally you're completely connected to wholeness within self. You're not in duality. It's when we're in duality that we feel anxiety and depression and worry and fear and pain and attachment. When we're in a blissful state, there is no attachment. You don't need anything else. You have everything within you. And this affects your daily life. It affects your relationships, because any type of codependent relationship, which I've had many of those, now you don't want that, because those types of relationships are superficial. They don't feel right here. And the other thing with meditation, if you do it more often, is you're more in tune with your physical body. So when you do eat go off path, which I still do, I like to test the waters, eat the wrong food, have the wrong routine, maybe have a glass of wine, all of these things. If you do a little blip in the road, it's not as impactful, but if you start to go down the path of the old path, it will show in your skin, it will show in your energy, it will show in your voice, it will show in your hair, it will show in your skin. I mean, your just how your energy level when you're throughout the day. I get tired. It's just in everything.
Mhm.
And it took a while for me to realize that over time. And I've been really lucky to have been surrounded by people who practice this every day. I don't every day. I go off on a path. The other way I like to explain it is with meditation is you have two cars, right? Two automobiles. One has shocks, the other one doesn't. And the one with the shocks is the meditator, the one without the shocks is the non-meditator. They both go over this extremely steep bump. And the one with the shocks, the meditator, doesn't have the same experience as the one without the shocks. What that just means is it takes the abruptness of going over that bump. It's not as shocking to the system as it is without the meditation or without the shocks.
I
As
love
in,
it.
thank you.
That's great. And it absolutely is that. It minimizes that fight or flight, that stress that can just throw you off course. And for me, I have started integrating meditation specifically in certain uh, areas of my life that would normally cause stress. So when I started this podcast, I was nervous just to, even be on screen, have conversations. I don't have nerves with that anymore, but I do still have nerves if I'm speaking in public, or if there's, a crowd or anything. Or I know if it's going to be recorded, there's multiple people, out in the world. And I have used meditation to calm my nerves before those instances. And the the way that I feel then in the midst of that is night and day. Because I put shocks back on the car, and
Yeah,
yeah, it is wild.
it is. And I can totally understand that with the podcast. With my startup, I've been encouraged to get myself out there, talk about my story, share it with other people so they can know what I've been through, to show them there's a way, right? There's options out there. There's unbounded opportunities for each of us to heal, right? And it sounds like you also had that same journey. And with speaking in public, with starting the podcast, I was awkward in the beginning. There's some days where it's better than others too, some better speaking days. Speaking in public, I've been doing that for a long time, but I still get nervous, and I think that little bit of nervousness is a good check. And I used to testify in court. So even if I knew my stuff, you never know what you're going to be asked. And so that meditation helps to kind of rebalance and provide an open perspective that you're not going to prejudge or make your decision too early. It's going to keep yourself open to receive and go, how do I feel about this? And be the observer versus being in the movie.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true. And the ability to have to still, feel our thoughts. Of course, like you talked about, we're all shadow and light. We have a shadow side. We are all dark and light. We are going to have negative thoughts and other things that come up. Totally normal, totally fine. And if we can step back and observe them, and oh, that's interesting. I wonder where that came from, what just triggered that. Um, yeah, and you're just able to slow down and go through that process so much more readily if you have a meditation practice.
It's a huge tool. And also it helps, going back to the mind, helps you be able to make those decisions that are more beneficial than unbeneficial. I don't say the right or wrong because I don't know if that really exists. I think because in one day it might be more beneficial to make that particular decision in the way that you did versus another time. So I don't know. And I think the right or wrong, and I sometimes have to catch myself where I'll use that
Yeah.
because that's more of a black and white approach. And it can get us going down the path of duality. So I think more beneficial versus unbeneficial. And I can't take credit for that. That's something that I've learned through some of the spiritual gurus that I've listened to. It's like, that resonates with me.
Right. Well, even you saying that you straddle the two worlds of, being very open and then, but in your job with toxicology, it's linear. There are certain things that serve you that are necessary. Um, yeah, and so it's not a better or worse, like good or bad, right or wrong. It's yeah, it's more fluid than that.
Yeah.
The
That's,
one thing I didn't ask you, and I know this is kind of going back to the beginning, but I have to ask because when I initially saw, toxicology as part of your job title, and then you recovered from 6 chronic illnesses, I was like, oh, well, she
mhm.
was working with toxins and she has a toxic overload. So, was there a connection there, or was that not exactly what your role was within the toxicology lab?
Are you asking me, was I exposed to toxins that may have caused the issue?
Yes. After all of this, which is funny, but I I understand a science-minded person might be like, okay, this is all fine and well, but back to this connection. Um, was there something there?
So I started having the symptoms before I started working in the field of toxicology, before I worked in any laboratory. And I did intern at a laboratory in California in 92 and 93 actually, which, yeah, maybe. But I started having symptoms in 92 with the pain, and then they kept going through 94. I didn't actually start working in this field of toxicology till 97. So now the question could be, was I exposed to anything over the course of my career? It's always possible. We do wear protective gear, lab coats, um, gloves. We work in with when we're dealing with biohazards. We have certain blood. Um, they're hoods that deal with biologics, and they're supposed to pull up any biologics or the pathogens rather through a specific filter. And then we also had chemical fume hoods that when we would add in chemicals into the biologics to pull out the drugs, which was pretty much every day, multiple times a day, right? We were supposed to be using that, and I always did. I was really good about following, I was big about safety. Three things that are important to me in my life are freedom, health, and safety. Because without those things, and you have to have freedom first, right, to have the other things, and to make sure you can take care of your own health, and then the safety aspect, they're all kind of intertwined. There's no higher priority of one of those. To me as a person, they're all important. We're seeing those being challenged all over the world today, which is really interesting. But yeah, and that's possible. Do I have any direct link back? Not necessarily. I'm sure that I could probably go back in time and maybe narrow it down. It's very difficult to prove that. I would say toxins show up in many ways: people, places, things, energy. Our food. I've eaten processed foods for many, many years. If I had to put my hat on processed foods over possible chemical exposure, I would say the processed foods were probably more apparent. And I wasn't educated as to what those things could do to my body, those chemicals. I was more worried about pharmaceutical drugs, which are very similar to some of those chemicals we see in processed foods. And oddly enough, and I still didn't really realize it until studying Ayurveda. There was a study which I'll share with you, and I'm paraphrasing, that when folks were eating ultra-processed foods, which are having anything in the freezer aisle, anything in a can, anything in a box that has a chemical in there other than the actual food itself, where it's extending shelf life, that can disrupt the digestive system, right? Just like chemicals can from environmental exposures or pharmaceuticals. So this study shows that with people who were consuming processed foods were gaining a pound a month. When people stopped consuming processed foods, they were losing a pound a month. Now, this is over the course of the whole entire study. This is an average, right? And I'm happy to share the study with you if you want to link it on the podcast. But that was profound for me to hear. So what I did was I just completely eliminated, and I was like, always had this weight issue, and some of the issues going back to, I had diabetes. I was able to, with type 2, remove, with A1C levels being high in glucose, reverse that. I also had hormonal issues, out of balance, out of whack, was gaining a lot of weight. The health was not my best. And I was able to improve that pretty well by 2019. But when I started studying Ayurveda, I eliminated processed foods for about a month, and weight fell off. I mean, fell off like that. I was like, whoa, there's something just to this, because everything else was remaining the same, right? That was the one thing I changed, and it just literally fell off. And that included not having a glass of wine, on an occasion, none of it. I just completely left it out. So then I did another month and another month. Just fell off. My skin started looking better, more glowing. And I put a lot of ghee in my diet also, which the ghee is clarified butter, by the way, and organic, goes into your tissues, and it will actually naturally extract out toxins, which are really difficult to get out of adipose tissue and some of your muscle tissue. Some of the worst toxins, that's where they hang out. They're not necessarily water soluble, is what I'm getting at. So the ghee will help extract that, but also it has a very nurturing quality, and so does milk. Milk is one of the few things you can put into your body where it doesn't take weeks. And I just learned this from another podcast guest, the Ayurvedic practitioner. It doesn't take weeks to get to the tissues. It's fairly quick, whereas most nutrients take weeks to get to certain tissues in your body. It's just actually where you can start seeing the positive results. So milk also is one of the only things that can satisfy all 6 tastes, and you need all 6 tastes here and there in your diet to make you feel satisfied with your food. when people are not satisfied with their food, and not that's not necessarily the taste all the times, but just how it feels in their physical body, the tendency is to eat more or eat things that aren't good, right? And they crave things that aren't good, like sugar and other things. So the milk really has a nurturing quality. And if you're going to consume it, the best way to consume it is to boil it, because it will reduce some of those proteins that are hard to digest, and it lightens it up, especially put cardamom and cinnamon, easier to digest. So even people that have been told that they have lactose intolerance, many of those folks can probably actually drink milk in that way.
And raw milk obviously is preferred from everything that I know. I know there's a lot of uh, misunderstanding about raw milk, but that's that's the best version we can get. Uh, I have not done raw milk. I'm not even sure where I would get it around here, but it seems like it keeps popping up in my algorithm. Um, and so I think that's a sign that I need to get myself some raw milk and cardamom. And what else did you say? Cinnamon?
Cinnamon and raw, and the difference between raw milk and regular milk that you would see is it's not pasteurization versus, and you can kill the bacteria in, or any bacteria that you may feel may be in that milk by boiling it. When you boil it, you actually kill off more bacteria than you do with pasteurization, is my understanding. I would say check me on that. But you also break down the proteins more so than you do with pasteurized milk. But with pasteurization, it's usually enriched, meaning they're adding supplements, which is another form of a possible chemical that you're now putting in that milk, right? So what I've been educated, and I have not actually consumed raw milk on a regular basis. I've tried it before. And we boil it and put cardamom and cinnamon in it. Cinnamon is a natural anti-inflammatory, and cardamom creates a sweetness, excuse me, which is beneficial to help people when they may have dryness in the body.
Cardamom is such a nostalgic flavor for me. My grandmother used to make a Christmas bread with it.
Mm.
So I also feel like just energetically, that would be like such a cozy, you know, warm thing because like you said, everything is energy and so when I think of that, that it brings back the happy memories and feeling taken care of. So it would be like the best warm glass of just nostalgia and goodness. So I'm excited to try it.
Oh, it is. And that's what actually, if I feel like I can't sleep or if my mind is too active before I go to bed, I take a hot bath, salt, do a little bit of yoga, just kind of meditation, boiled milk, cardamom and cinnamon, 30 minutes before I go to bed. I drink it slow. It is very calming. And some other times I'll add an herb called shatavari, which helps with hormones on a natural basis. And shatavari, spelled Shatavari, I believe. People can find it on a couple of different sites like Banyan Botanicals, for example. It's asparagus tips. Asparagus naturally will balance your hormones. So I put that in a lot of my food that I cook with ghee and home cooked meals, fresh cooked meals with a lot of spices that are good for your own body. What is good for one person wouldn't be necessarily good for the other. This is what we do with Ayurveda. And so we try to naturally put in these spices that will help with reducing inflammation, calming the mind, helping to the most important thing is to keep our digestive fire balanced, our Agni, so that anything that we put in our body is easily assimilated. Because one of the biggest challenges with health is digestion. A lot of people think that eating raw fruits and vegetables are good. They're not good for everybody, especially raw vegetables, because they're very, very difficult to digest, and they can lead towards undigested food going throughout the body. And what that does is that creates accumulation of toxins in the body, and that's why we have inflammation. So if you cook those with spices, the vegetables, you're not, yeah, you might be reducing some of the nutrients, but if you can't absorb it, it doesn't matter, right? Fruits like berries and mangoes, papaya, those are okay raw because they're easy to break down, but things that have more fiber, such as apples and pears, you want to cook those with spices, preferably cinnamon, cardamom. I put ghee on there, and then I cut those up and I put those in my oatmeal. So that makes it a lot easier for your halfway there with the digestion. It's already warm. It's easier to absorb the nutrients that are there that your body needs.
So I would assume this is something that you help in the way that you serve now. So what is it that since you've left, you've left toxicology for good, you've retired from that, correct?
I retired from the laboratory agency that I worked for, and I took on a consulting position, which is a contract through the Society of Forensic Toxicologists, and they have a collaborative agreement, or a cooperative agreement rather, with National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So I support laboratories in the western side of the country, California, Hawaii, Pacific Territories, Arizona, and New Mexico, and getting, helping them get resources to help their laboratories. I also help support a lot of our stakeholders with traffic safety, such as the courts, judges understanding impaired driving, like what is, the impact of that, testimony training and all of those areas. So I do that with some counterparts, some other folks that are supporting other areas of the country. And then I have left, when I retired, and then I have a startup company that's called Connect for Healing, which was launched in December. It's a new healthcare model for the US based on my experience. I call it the trifecta framework, which brings together Western medicine to stabilize, psychotherapy to support the mind, and alternative therapies such as Ayurveda, naturopathy, Chinese medicine, homeopathy, to do the root cause analysis. And this trifecta team works together to help people who have chronic illnesses such as fibromyalgia and all of the chronic illnesses that usually arise as a result of that. So that's our real target market focus right now as we're trying to build traction. We'll scale it out to other chronic illnesses, but we have a whole list of different types of providers on there that will help kind of work together. And we're building a list of different test clients and patients throughout the US. We actually have one in Minnesota. We have 2 in California, 1 in Florida, and the list is growing. And we're helping these folks that have chronic illness, help them reverse or get rid of, or whatever you want to call it, based on our experiences that we've all had personally and have personally experienced through observation and studies. And then I also have a podcast, Your Health is Wealth podcast, which is my way of getting my curiosity out because I'm so curious about so many things. I want to meet people. I want to help to amplify them out to other people so they can learn too. So education is really important to me, whether it's in the field of toxicology or in the field of health and wellness with my own experience. And, I interview folks, and you're the 3rd podcast that I've actually been a guest on. I'm going to start being on other podcasts so I can share my own personal story, but also talk about the projects that I'm working on. And to be clear, Connect for Healing isn't about me. I came up with the idea through my own experience. I've meditated and prayed that something would come to me to help continue my own journey, but help other people. And that's what came in. And I wasn't sure exactly what it was my initial ideas have kind of evolved over time, and that's where I'm at right now. So it's about the community of providers that are working together, and the community of people as advisors, as consultants, as hopefully down the road a executive team that will help build this from my initial idea out to something that can incredibly change people's lives. And it's also about the clients and patients, and through feedback of all of those folks to be able to create this new system.
That is so cool. And it goes with your theme of threes. That seems to be your number, the trifecta. I just looked the other day because I've been seeing threes a ton, but it seems to have a lot to do with support from your spirit team, and you kind of you're on the right path. Like we're here to keep plugging away is kind of what I get from it. And anytime I see repeating numbers, but threes to me really speak to that support, which is great.
It's mind, body, soul, or soul, mind, body, however you want to say it, which creates wholeness. And the other part of that too is if you look at astrology, the third house is communication. It could be transportation and all of that. So anything that comes out of the third house of astrology, anything that's ruled by the number three, the Trinity, if you look at a pyramid that has three sides versus four, 3, 6, 9, those are three numbers. Ultimately, those equal 9, the power of 9. I mean, I could go down all kinds of rabbit holes, right? The power of 9 is such a powerful number. In the ninth house of astrology, it also means philosophy. And then when you look at, we have a significant date coming up. I'm really curious to see if anything happens on March 6th, 2025. That equals 3, 6, 9. And it also happens a second time in that month, March 24th, 2025. It also equals 3, 6, 9. So I don't know, but anyone who's an astrologer out there, maybe you can look into this.
Yeah.
Something to it. Yeah. So, but yeah, the three definitely has a significant meaning behind it. And the other thing too, this is kind of crazy. I started reading a lot of quantum physics books.
Oh.
There's a lot of stuff going on right now with that. If you look at Connect for Healing, I was like, why is this name happening? And I tried to get it to be Connect FOR Healing, and someone else had that. Someone had something similar. So I thought, well, I'll just break it up with the 4. And the 4 actually means 13. 1 plus 3 is 4. And the 3 and the 13 is mind, body, soul. 1 is the 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. And 4 means foundation and connection and home. Connect is 7 letters. Healing is 7 letters. And if you look at C as the 3rd letter of the alphabet, O is the 15th, N is the 14th, and you add all of those corresponding numbers together, you get 134. 1 plus 3 plus 4 equals 8, and on a life path, 8. And 8 is the infinity sign. And the infinity means it's unbounded. There's no limits. So we all have an unbounded opportunity to heal through ourself. Connect equals 11. Healing equals 11. And also the 4 in the center is 11, 11. So 11, 11, 11, 11. And connect is the feminine side, which is the receptive. Healing is the action side, which is the masculine. So through healing your mind, body, soul, and connecting to self creates wholeness. You're healing the feminine and the masculine energy within you. And also that 8 sign in the 8th house of astrology is our shadow side, which is our trauma. So through healing our trauma in this lifetime, we're healing all of those aspects within ourselves and across the world. So Connect for Healing holds the frequency of 8.
Wow, that was really a download that you got then, that you like, because all this stuff, all of those connections probably came to you afterwards. You were like, oh, and
I had
then,
no idea.
yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the 8 came to me and I thought, oh, great, I'm an 8 life path 8. Great. All right. Which is CEO, leadership, right? Power, infinity. unboundedness. But the fact that there was 11 and 11 and all that stuff, that didn't actually come to me until 2023. Because I was writing, that's when I started like getting information about more codes. And December 4th of 2023, real specific information in regards to how it's related to DNA and molecular weight of DNA and molecular weight of other aspects of DNA, and how all of these numbers were related to that. And it was like going down a rabbit hole, right? I was woken up at 2 in the morning, couldn't sleep, and I journal, and all this stuff's in the journal. But specifically with the Connect for Healing, so that going back to the 8, I was like, huh. And then Connect being 11 and healing being 11 and 11, 11, I still don't 100% know what all of that means. But if you look at my logo, it corresponds to those frequencies too.
That's
There's
so
6
cool.
petals of feminine, 6 petals of masculine, and 6 is the number of healing, and the 6th house is healing. 6 plus 6 is 12, and 1 plus 2 is 3. And anyway,
Yeah, trust me, I'm so into that. Okay, so what you're doing is, rooted in such amazing intention of healing in the way that you have found healing for yourself. I love stories of how people have used their experience of trauma, setback, whatever it is, and they're using it for good to pay it forward. And that's absolutely what you're doing. Where can people connect with you? I'll have things in the show notes, but just to direct people, where are you most active, so they can find you?
so as far as the startup, it's connect4healing.com. That's where the platform lives. That's the domain, and you can peruse that site. The way that we've set it up as of now, we're open to any feedback to making changes, is you can click on the call to action buttons, find your provider. You click on that button, it will list a list of providers, and you can filter them through your health concerns. So if you click on trauma PTSD, it will narrow your search down to specific providers. And then when you click on the providers, when you have that narrowed down, now you can further narrow down to the specific modalities that they offer. You can also go on onto the page that has the categories of services or service page, and you can narrow down to your provider based on that too. So there's a couple of different journeys. If you want to sign up on the interest list and set up an account as a client or patient, you can do that even by booking with one of the providers. So as you click on a provider's page, you can click one of their sessions and book directly through that, and then you'll receive emails to walk you through how to set up a session with them. How to set up an account through our EHR system, which is HIPAA compliant, by the way, to be able to communicate back and forth with them and get those services. And then alternatively, you can click on, on that first page, there's a area where you click on it and it will send you to connectforhealing.net. And there's a form there that you would fill out, and then I would send you an email and find out more information from you to give you show you which providers might provide those services you're interested in. And then from there, you would set up your EHR account to communicate with them. The other thing is the providers, depending on their intake, would determine which other providers might be beneficial to work with you. You don't have to work with multiple providers, but if it's chronic illness, it's usually really beneficial to have all of those aspects of those different providers working together to try to help you get to a space of healing as quick as possible. And then the other part is, is Your Health is Wealth podcast. That is not connected directly with Connect for Healing, but it is a way that I educate people, and it does point back. A lot of the times, because a lot of the guests are connected in one way or another. And you can go to Your Health is Wealth podcast on YouTube. You can also find me on Spotify, Apple Music or Apple Podcast, or Amazon. And you can get the video and or audio versions, or you can go to my website, which is yourhealthiswealth.com. And it's yourhealthizwealth.com. And it has podcast episodes listed. It also has the other social media that's related to the podcast. I'm on Instagram for both Connect for Healing, Your Health is Wealth podcast, Facebook, X, and YouTube with Your Health is Wealth podcast.
Awesome. We'll make sure we get those in there. And yeah, Kristen, I can't thank you enough for talking with me today. Your story is so fascinating. I love to see when people get to the root cause of anything and are sharing that education with others, because I very much believe we have so much healing we can do within ourselves. We do.
Absolutely. And just to confirm, because I wasn't sure if I was clear about this, I got rid of all of those illnesses by 2019. They were completely gone and they have not returned.
Incredible.
So I feel very blessed.
Yeah, speaks to the importance of connecting self.
It does. And it's such an honor to be here, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much.